folks, welcome to the channel Thinking Theology. I'm Don. I don't defend theology here. I don't come against theology here. I look at arguments from the scientific world, the physics world, the theological world, whatever, and I just weigh them for myself. I'm agnostic, so I stand generally in the middle, and I just like to hear how arguments are made, and then I make some comments on how they resonate with me or they don't, where I see the gaps in the argumentation and the specific premises or conclusions or some of the metacognitive deficiencies might be. Obviously, my opinion, I'm the one speaking, so it is a matter of opinion. I'm looking at the sociological implications of religion. And this video was recommended to me by YouTube, as YouTube's algorithm recommends videos to each of us. And this was from the Crash Course channel. They've got 16 million subscribers, so they've been around a while and have evidently done very good work. I've not seen anything of theirs. I haven't seen this video. I'm going to put the link to their channel down below, though, so you can go check out their stuff. But the sociological implications, basically, of religion.
Religion might not seem like something a sociologist can study. After all, religion is about personal beliefs, right? So sociology won't give you any answers about the existence of God or how many angels can dance on the head of a pin. But sociology can help you think about religion as a social institution. In the same way that we might study the family or the government, we can ask questions about religion's role in society. Like, how do different religions influence social norms in a society? What's the function of religion in a society? Does it improve social cohesiveness or entrench inequalities? Before we try to answer those big questions, let's start with the simpler one. What is religion?
Define our terms.
To understand how sociologists think about religion, we need to go back to the work of our old friend, French sociologist Émile Durkheim. Durkheim defined religion not in terms of gods or supernatural phenomena, but in terms of the sacred, things that are set apart from society as extraordinary, inspiring awe, and deserving of reverence. He claimed that in all societies there's a difference between the sacred and the profane, or the mundane, everyday parts of life. Religion, then, is a social institution that involves a unified system of beliefs and practices that recognizes the sacred. But this isn't a setup between good and evil. Sacred doesn't mean good, and profane doesn't mean bad. Instead, recognizing something as sacred is about seeing a certain place, object, or experience as special and creating markers that separate it from your day-to-day life. It's natural, then, to think about religion from the perspective of symbolic interactionism, which thinks about society in terms of the symbols that humans construct. And all religions rely on the use of symbols to create the sacred. Rituals, for example, are a form of symbolic practice that highlight faith. Many religions use certain actions during prayer that symbolize deference to God, such as Catholics making the sign of the cross before prayer, or Muslims supplicating themselves and facing Mecca, the birthplace of the Prophet Muhammad. Many religions also practice ritual ablution, or washing certain parts of the body during a religious ceremony. For example, in the religious practice of baptism, water is a symbol of people's belief that faith cleanses the soul. Objects can also take on sacred meaning. Symbols like the cross or the Star of David are considered totems, objects that we have collectively defined as sacred. Types of dress or grooming practices, such as men's beards in Islam or Orthodox Judaism, also become sacred indicators of faith because they're visible symbols of religious belief. In this way, totems confer in-group membership to those who wear or use these symbols because they provide a way for people to demonstrate their faith and recognize that faith in others. But the role of religion in society goes beyond influencing our symbolic.
I call those two the fundamentalist groups, as I refer to them as mutual admiration societies. And whether the totems or not are part of groups, sometimes they are, sometimes they're not. And sometimes the lack of those is the way you recognize somebody, say like the Amish or somebody. But mutual admiration society, I tell you you're wonderful, you tell me I'm wonderful, because we believe the same things. And this is where, even cultish behavior or very, very entrenched behavior exists, because we all have the social compact and we don't verbally say it in the sense that it's a social compact. We don't tell each other we're part of a social compact or contract. But what we're going to do is, I'm going to tell you you're wonderful and I agree with you because I love your doctrine, because I believe the same doctrine. So you're going to tell me I'm wonderful and all this sort of stuff. It's a mutual admiration society, and these symbols and totems can play a part in those.
practices. In addition to defining the sacred and the profane, Emil Durkheim also looked at religion through the lens of structural functionalism, and he identified three major functions of religion that contribute to the operation of society. First, religion helps establish social cohesion by uniting people around shared symbols, norms, and values.
Right.
Durkheim argued that religious thought promotes norms like morality, fairness, charity, and justice. Churches act as gathering places, forming the backbone of social life for many people. In fact, membership in a church is the most common community association for Americans. Second, Durkheim said societies use religion as a form of social control. People behave well not only out of fear of their friends and families disapproving, but also out of a desire to remain in their God's good graces. Christianity and Judaism, for example, have the Ten Commandments, a set of rules for behavior that they believe were sent directly from God. But these commandments aren't just rules about how to worship. Many of them match up with societal norms, like respecting your parents or not committing adultery.
Point that I've made for quite a while is that even without the tablets that Moses came down with all the commandments, there were more than 10. There were 690 or something like that. People would have come up with these rules anyways, a matter of social cooperation among one another. Murder is bad. Generally speaking, people figured that out. Stealing somebody's wife, if you will. Generally speaking, anybody would figure out that's bad. So we didn't need those. So which parts, and like what she is saying, that these aren't just commandments about how to worship, they have social implications.
Or with secular laws, which prohibit murder and theft. Third, in a functionalist perspective, religion provides people with a sense of purpose in life. Sometimes it can feel like our lives are such tiny blips in the grand scheme of the universe, it can be hard to imagine why your actions matter.
Russell Brand.
Religion gives people a reason to see their lives as meaningful by framing them within the greater purpose of their God's grand plan. But while Durkheim's framing demonstrates the many ways religions promote social unity, religion can, of course, also be a force of division. Social conflict theory perspectives understand religion in terms of how it entrenches existing inequalities. Karl Marx saw religion as an agent of social stratification, which served those in power by legitimizing the status quo and framing existing inequality as part of a divine plan. Rulers in many societies were believed to be given their right to rule by divine right. Chinese emperors were believed to have a mandate from heaven and were given the title Son of Heaven to indicate their divine authority to rule. In Europe, heads of state were often also the head of the church. In fact, to this day, the British monarchs are the formal heads of the Church of England. And some Christian religions, such as Calvinism, espouse predestination, or the belief that God preordains everything that comes to pass, including whether you get into heaven. So by this logic, having wealth and power was seen as an indication of God's good favor. So for these reasons, Marx saw religion as a huge barrier to revolutionary change, referring to it as the opiate of the masses. After all, it's hard to convince people to rise up against the elites if they believe that the elites have the power of God behind them. In addition to entrenching political and economic inequalities, conflict theory perspectives also explore how religion contributes to gender and racial inequalities. Let's go to the thought bubble to look at how feminist theory and race conflict theory help us understand religion's effects on these kinds of inequality. If you walk around any major museum in the Western world, you're pretty much guaranteed to find some art depicting religious figures from Judaism or Christianity. And in these paintings, God is pretty much exclusively an old white man with a beard. And in fact, divine figures and their prophets in most religions are male. Virtually all of the world's major religions are patriarchal, with religious texts often explicitly describing men in the image of God and women in subordinate roles to men. For example, in Christianity, the first man, Adam, was created in God's image, whereas the first woman, Eve, was created from Adam's rib to serve and obey Adam. Many religions also position women as immoral beings in need of male constraint. In the Bible, Eve committed the original sin by tempting Adam to eat the forbidden fruit and got both of them booted from paradise. Many religions ban women from positions with the clergy, including Catholicism, Orthodox Judaism, and Islam. Religion has also been used as a way to control women's behaviors, requiring them to dress modestly, or not allowing women to speak in church, or be alone with men outside their family. Religion has also been used to uphold another type of social inequality, racial inequality. Slavery in the United States, for example, was framed as morally justifiable based on various texts from the Bible, most prominently the story of Cain and Abel, in which God marked Cain for murdering his brother, which was interpreted to mean marking him as sinful with darker skin. But that's not to say that religion is always on the side of oppression. Quakers, a sect of Christianity, were leaders in the abolition movement and in the women's suffrage movement of the 19th century. The civil rights movement of the 1960s was led by many with ties to the Black religious community, most notably the the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, a civil rights organization headed up by a Baptist minister that you might have heard of named Martin Luther King Jr. Thanks, Thought Bubble. So we've talked a lot so far about religion in theory, but how does religion work in a practical sense? Understanding how different religions are organized and how they integrate with the rest of society helps us understand which of these theories make sense in different religious contexts. We only have to look at the US to see why understanding the practical importance of religion might be of interest to sociologists. In the United States, more than 70% of American adults claim that religion is important in their lives, which is more than double the rate of adults in other high-income countries like Norway or Japan. Wow. National surveys show that about 50% of Americans identify as Protestants, 20% identify as Catholics, 6% identify with a non-Christian faith, and 23% do not identify with a religion at all. Within the Protestant faith, there are a large number of denominations, or subgroups of religious practice, including both mainstream denominations, such as Presbyterians and Lutherans, and evangelical churches, such as Methodists and Baptists. Evangelical denominations are characterized by more active attempts to proselytize, or spread the faith to others outside the faith. Right. But who identifies as what religion depends a lot on who you are.
That's if you're a Christian too, like I know if you want to gain Israeli citizenship, as I understood it, this is going back about 15 years or so, you cannot identify as Christian and gain citizenship. I don't know if you had to identify as Jewish to gain citizenship in Israel, because there are a number of non-Jews. There are Muslims, there are Christians, atheists in Israel itself. Tel Aviv is generally more liberal. Jerusalem is more conservative. And different countries, different places have different ideas about the way in which they want to maintain their own culture, their own identity. But in the U.S., we have a whole bunch of different things where you can believe what you want. But I do remember that if you wanted to become an Israeli citizen, you could not be identified as a Christian. I'm almost confident you couldn't identify yourself as a Muslim. All right, let's see where this concludes.
In terms of where you live, in terms of class, and in terms of race and ethnicity. More well-established religious faiths that are well integrated into society are what sociologists call churches. Most major religions are what we would call a church. For example, Christianity, Islam, Judaism, Hinduism, and Buddhism are all churches. Religious sects, meanwhile, are faiths with belief systems that are less formal and less integrated into society, and they tend to attract followers who are more disadvantaged. Some examples include Jehovah's Witnesses, Pentecostals, or Unitarians. Not only does class matter when it comes to your religion, where you live might too. Catholicism is more common in the northeastern and southwestern states, whereas the South has high concentrations of evangelical Protestants, such as Baptists, and the Midwest has higher concentrations of other Protestant faiths, such as Methodists or Lutherans. Many of these regional differences stem from which racial ethnic groups settled in these regions.
Well, and this is one of the knocks that atheists have or agnostics have against the idea that there's a God, personal God, and all this, is that what religion you are tends to be a function of where you're born. It seems to be kind of random. Like, if you're born in Saudi Arabia, you're going to be Muslim, by and large. There are some Christians there, but they're not allowed to admit it. And here, you're more likely to be Catholic. Maybe that's because there may be more Italians and Latinos in the Northeast, or would you say the Southwest. But it is one of the things that you want to account for, be able to account for, is it really just sort of a function of what family, if I'm a certain religion, no different than politics, generally people follow the politics of their parents, that it's just a function of what family I was born into, or what town or state or country I was born in. Like if I'm born in China, or if I'm born in North Korea, I've got a different belief system. It seems to be geographical versus, call it logical. Something that you may want to account for.
The Midwest, for example, had high numbers of German and Scandinavian immigrants settled there, and these ethnic groups are often Lutherans. Irish and Italian Americans, who were more likely to be Catholic, settled in New England and the Mid-Atlantic. Black Americans, who are heavily concentrated in southern states, are somewhat more likely to be religious than the U.S. population as a whole, with 87% claiming an affiliation with some faith. And the vast majority of Black Americans identify with a Protestant faith, with evangelical churches being the most common affiliation. There's also a growing number of Black Americans who identify as Muslim, with about 40% of all native-born Muslims in the US identifying themselves as African American. Overall, however, the importance of religion in the United States has been on the decline in recent decades, a process known as secularization. Younger Americans are much more likely now to report that they do not believe in any religion compared to past generations. Nonetheless, the influence of religion on society isn't going anywhere anytime soon. As we learned today, no matter which school of sociological thought you subscribe to, religion has ties to the very rules and norms that shape what our society and culture look like.
So that is an argument that atheists make quite a bit, and the issue, most atheists don't care if people believe in God or not. The issue, and I've said this too, is that my kids go to school with your kids, and then the school system is going to decide what the kids are taught. And nowadays, there's an anti-religious bias. I mean, bringing a Bible to school or talking about God in school is viewed as a violation of separation of church and state doctrine and so forth. But the issues become when I want to enforce my way of living upon you. And that's where the infighting continues and the outfighting continues. So, all right, guys. Just bring that up. I like to have discussion on this stuff and enlighten folks, and I get enlightened along the way too. And then whatever commentary I've got, I bring to bear on it. But she covered a lot of ground in this. I like her. I like the way she presents what she presents. She didn't proselytize anything. She didn't proselytize a sociological view. She didn't, she covered some potentially incendiary topics like racism, slavery, feminism, and the patriarchy and all this. But she didn't go overboard at all. She just presented it informationally, and that's more my style too. So, all right, guys, have a great day. See you on another video, and keep thinking theology or whatever you're going to think. Hey, folks, if you want to take the personality test that I created for my life coaching practice, which is based on the book that I wrote, put your phone up, turn it on camera, and focus on this, and it'll take you to it. And it'll take you about 20 minutes to complete the test. It's free, and you'll get some information on your personality. It's quite detailed, quite revealing. It's kind of fun as well. And I'll be leaving this QR code up on the wall behind me for my regular videos. So I hope you take it, and I hope you enjoy it.